Okay, namaskar, Didi. Thank you for doing the interview.
Narada.
So tell us,
My pleasure.
how did you get involved with Ananda Marga? When and where and why?
I think I was always kind of spiritually or religiously inclined since I was a child, even though my family environment was not at all that way inclined, but I always felt the presence of a higher power. Anyway, that didn't really manifest so much when I was younger, but I remember one experience when I was a teenager and I was probably doing something I shouldn't have been doing. I was riding on the back of some unknown motorbike and we had a small accident and I was thrown off the back of the bike and I didn't have a helmet or anything on. But the experience was like falling into a soft mattress. And I was so, I don't know, my mind went into a different state of consciousness, and all I could think is something's looking after me. and I was just, like I said, my mind was in a different state of consciousness, and everybody was running around asking, am I okay? And blah, blah, blah. And I was like, sort of just not aware of anything else, but just that feeling of something's looking after me. And I think around that time, I started to feel very strongly there's some force guiding me in a very specific direction. That time, but that was in Japan, that experience. And actually, when we moved from Australia to Japan when I was around 15 years old, I really was influenced a lot by the spiritual, traditions of Japan, especially in the arts, because a lot of the arts are based in Zen kind of realization rather than sort of just the artist's skill. The artists need skill, but they need that aha moment in order to create fantastic art. And that aha moment comes from a higher consciousness, not just our intellectual realm. So these kind of ideas and the whole concept of Zen, Buddhism and meditation really attracted me a lot. So I actually, first of all, got into Zen meditation, mostly just from reading books. I didn't have a specific teacher. So I had friends who were into meditation or Zen, the concept of Zen, and kind of, going along in that flow. But one particular friend had been practicing Zen meditation very sincerely for about 5 years. He was a little bit older than me. And that was when I was in university already in Japan. I did a year of university in the international division of one Japanese university. So he really influenced me a lot. And what happened with him was that he was about to graduate from university. And he told me that he wasn't sure what he'd do after he graduated. He said either he'd go back to the States or maybe he'd go to India. And he said, but before I do that, I want to travel around Japan and stop in different temples and also dojo. He was a black belt in judo and practice meditation and practice martial arts, and just to clear my mind and decide what I want to do. So he started that journey and ended up in Korea in a small temple in the mountains. In Korea, there's many small communities of monks and nuns living in mountain temples. And at that time, I don't know these days, but I felt they used to live a very pure life. A lot of Japanese or even Korean practitioners of Zen type meditation weren't vegetarian, but in these small communities, they used to follow strict vegetarian diet and strict kind of discipline. So he said he was in one of these mountain temples and he was doing meditation and he felt he needs somebody to guide him. He cannot go deeper by his own effort. And so when he was traveling on the boat back from Korea to Japan, he saw an orange monk. So that was the Dada of Ananda Marga, who was based in Taiwan at the time. And I think maybe it was Dada's first visit to Japan. So he didn't really know anybody. Maybe he had a few addresses in his pocket and not so much money. So my friend, Leslie was his name. Leslie went up to this orange monk and just said, "Do you know something about meditation? Can you teach me?" So they linked up and they hitchhiked together from Shimonoseki in the south of Japan back up to Yokohama, where I was also living in Yokohama. And in Yokohama, they stayed in another friend's house. And in that house, this brother Leslie got initiation. And when he got initiation, when he heard his mantra, he went into samadhi. I asked that Dada some years later. He said, yes, he just lost consciousness and went into samadhi upon hearing his mantra. And so the next day, this brother came to the university. So I hadn't seen him for 3 months, and I saw him from walking towards me from down the corridor, and he was just shining. There was something, amazing feeling about him, I felt, and he was shining and smiling from ear to ear, and he came up to me and he looked at me. He said, "Are you doing meditation?" I said, "Yeah, well, sometimes, not every day." I mean, that time I was dabbling in Zen meditation. So I said, "Yeah, once in a while I do meditation." He just became very serious and he looked at me. He said, "You have to do meditation." He said, "You have to do meditation. Twice a day, you have to do it." And he said it with such conviction and so much spiritual force that since that day, I sit every day, at least twice for meditation. So he invited Dada to the university and I met Dada. At the time, I was editor of the university newspaper. And so I interviewed Dada and arranged a lecture for Dada in the university. And Dada had said he wants to set up some Jagriti in Tokyo area. So we were going around with Dada looking at different places. But Dada stayed about 2 weeks. And I don't know why, if it was because he wasn't used to initiating sisters or because why, but he didn't ask me if I want to learn meditation. And I also didn't ask him. And so I didn't get initiated at that time. And after 2 weeks, Dada went back to Taiwan and I didn't see him again. Then about, 6 months or so after that, I transferred the university back to ANU in Australia. But because I'd already started a lifestyle change, I was doing meditation daily. I began to stop eating meat. I even started some kind of fasting regime and different things that I was reading in books. No, actually, the reason I transferred back to Australia was that somehow along the line it came in my mind to study Sanskrit. When I asked all my professors or parents, or they all said, Sanskrit? Why would you want to study Sanskrit? That's like a dead language. That's crazy. No, but it kept sticking in my mind to study Sanskrit. I was actually interested in the power of words. I like writing, and I felt words have a power that can influence people's minds. So I was interested in this power of words, and I'd read that just bits and pieces about Sanskrit and mantras and this and that they have some power. So I was interested in this concept. So I went back to Australia, to ANU, the Australian National University, because they had a course in Sanskrit. Why I chose that in the end was because nobody else around me was giving me any positive feedback. So I decided to throw the I Ching, that Chinese divination book, which normally I didn't do those kind of things. It was like a one-off because this feeling was so strong, study Sanskrit. So I went in my room, closed the door, did everything the book said, lit the incense, blah, 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 blah. And I threw the coins to get a certain hexagram. So the hexagram that came up was a perfect balance between heaven and earth. And in the purport of the hexagram, it said, this will help you to lead armies and create new nations. So I thought, wow, this is such a positive response that I knew I had to study Sanskrit. So that's why I went to ANU. At ANU, I ran into a Magi. I didn't know at the time he was a Magi. He was teaching yoga. He was Brother Virupaksh from the US. So he was also studying Sanskrit. He was in second year Sanskrit. I was in first year Sanskrit.
ANU, for people who don't understand,
Yeah.
ANU means the Australian National University, correct?
Yeah. Right. I'm going to this Virupaksh yoga class because I thought, I was not so much interested in physical yoga, but I thought, okay, let me go and see how this guy teaches. And I liked his vibration. I liked that he did, some meditation. And that shortly after we started that class, I needed to find a place to live. And so I asked him, I said, do you happen to know any place, where I could rent a room that I don't really want to live with people who drink and smoke a lot and, that kind of, I wasn't into that other student scene. So he said, in a couple of weeks, there's somebody coming to Canberra to set up a Jagriti, like a yoga house. So he said, if you want, you can live there. So fine. So I ended up going to live in the Ananda Marga yoga house. At the time, Virupaksh was there, and the LFT who came to start it was eventually Dada Japasidananda. Now he's not a worker anymore. And then eventually another sister who became a Didi, Chinmai, I forget all her other names, was there, and somebody else, anyway. So in my mind, I hadn't connected yet that this Ananda Marga was the same organization as the Dada I'd met in Japan. I don't know why I didn't relate it. So it wasn't until after living in a Jagrati, I was initiated, I don't know, by Dada Abhidevananda, maybe about 2 months after I'd been in the Jagrati. And I hadn't realized up till then that it was the same organization until one day I was cleaning out my things and I found a name card of that Dada I'd met in Japan. And I thought, oh, he's Ananda Marga, and this is also Ananda Marga. Anyway, that was a revelation. So the reason I liked living in the Jagrati and the reason I liked Ananda Marga, one was because of the meditation, because I'd already decided in my life that meditation was essential to human life. And two, because of the social involvement and social philosophy. I thought about becoming a nun in the past, but I didn't want to be removed from the society. I felt we need to do something to change the society. So the combination of the spiritual and the social, or the social with the spiritual base, really attracted me to Ananda Marga. It was a revolutionary ideology that I loved. So I got initiated. That was 1976.
Right.
No, 1973. 1973. And then the end of that year, Dada was organizing an LFT training. That was going to be summer holidays. So I asked Dada, I said, I don't want to be an LFT because I want to continue my studies. And first he said, no, you cannot attend. I only want people who want to work full-time for Ananda Marga to attend. Then I said, yeah, but I want to write and I need a philosophical basis for my writing. So he said, okay. He said, if you have that motivation, and he said, anyway, Baba likes artists, so so I attended the LFT training. And at the end of the LFT training, I didn't go back to university, mostly because during the LFT training, I got involved in making the sectorial newsletter. At the time, it was called Clarion Call. And as I'd already had experience in that kind of publications work, so Dada put me in charge of making the newsletter. So at the end of LFT training, I thought, well, this is the kind of work I want to do with the kind of people I want to do it with and the kind of ideas I want to express. So, what I wasn't really, how to say, I didn't think having a paper degree was the most important thing in life. I thought practical experience is better than a paper degree. So I ended up becoming an LFT, working in sectoral office. And then about 6 months after that, we had the first sectoral retreat in Australia. And there were about 100 Magis there, as I recall, from all over Australia, New Zealand. And during that retreat, we had scheduled, I think it was a 12-hour kirtan. But it was so powerful that we didn't stop. It ended up going for 24 hours. And during that kirtan, then it was just clear to me that, my life was to become a Didi I hadn't really thought about it intellectually or rationally before that, and I didn't question it after that. So that was just Baba's grace that feeling was so strong during that kirtan. So about 6 months after that, I went to India.
Yes.
I went a few days before you, Narada.
Yeah.
Then you came with Chinmay and Ketana and that, right?
That's right.
So, yes. So we were 4 who went at that time, and the other 3 went to Varanasi Training Center, and I was asked to help out in central office for a while before going to training center because of my experience in publications work. That time, Dada Pranavananji wanted me to make the central level newsletter, the Harbinger it was called at the time. So I was there for 5 months, and in June 1975, the state of emergency was declared in India. Ananda Marga went underground, and the training center was closed. So I stayed in India as a kind of underground LFT, helping to keep communication for the central office for about 8 months. So somebody came to take over my role, and I went. That time, Sweden Training Center was open, so I went to Sweden to do my Acharya training.
After becoming a Didi, you met Baba and had some experiences. Would you like to tell us about some of those experiences?
I'd gone to India for reporting. I'm not sure if this was the same reporting or another reporting, but at one time Baba, we each had to go in front when it was our sector's turn. So when I was in front and Baba, one day he asked me, "What's in the little bottles?" And I really didn't know what Baba was talking about. The little bottles, what's Baba talking about? Maybe about flower remedies with alcohol in them, or I couldn't imagine what Baba was talking about. So I was very puzzled, and the Didis were behind me, so I sort of turned around to try and find out what I should say. When Baba became angry, he said, "But why is she turning around? Why does she need to ask somebody else? Get out, get out. All the Didis, get out, get out." So, threw all the Didis out of the room because of something about little bottles. I still haven't worked out what he meant by the little bottles. Then another time he asked me, "What's this?" Usually Baba had this round bolster pillows that he could put his elbows on. So he asked me, "What's this?" At the time I didn't know the word bolster. So I said, it's a pillow, Baba." He said, "No, this is not a pillow, this is a bolster." I said, "Yes, Baba, it's a bolster." Then he said, "And?" He said, "Do you prefer..." No, he said, "Some pillows are stuffed with cotton, and some pillows are filled with air. And which do you prefer?" He asked me. Again, I didn't know what to say. In my mind, I thought maybe air is a little bit more unusual than cotton, so I said, "Air, Baba." And he looked around, he said, "You see, she's making a 17th point. She likes pillows with air." So I also don't know whether it's past life or future life or what Baba was referring to with the little bottles in the air. But then Baba said, "You've committed a crime." I said, "Yes, Baba." Actually, he said, "You've committed a corporal crime." Yes, Baba. Though I don't know. At the time, I didn't know what Baba was referring to. Then Baba said, "Remove her Avadhutikaship." Everybody was shocked. Some people started to push me from behind, say something, cry, say you're sorry. But I didn't know what to do at the time, and I was also in a state of shock. And Baba said, "Okay, next Didi." So we went out. After we went out from reporting, and people were a little bit afraid to talk to me because they didn't know how I'd be feeling or what. And it was quite an unusual punishment. I was the first Didi. Actually, Baba never did that punishment to many Didis. Only myself and I think sometime after that Didi Anandagaorii. Though with Dadas it became quite common, but at that time it did only happen to a few Dadas. So everybody was unsure, even the central workers, what to do. And it wasn't until the following day, just before we went up for reporting, that the central Didi said, "I think you better wear a white sari when we go out for reporting." And as we were walking up the stairs, we were all pushing up the stairs, crowded to go into the reporting. And the Didi behind me, central Didi, she said, "And your name can be Gargi." Then I got shocked because I don't like this name Gargi. I dislike this name. I dislike the sound of it. So I hadn't known the whole time when they said, "Remove the Avadhutikaship and change the white sari," still in my mind it was going on. This is Baba's game, this is Baba's drama. I didn't feel so emotionally upset about it. When the Didi said, "And your name can be Gargi," I really got upset in my mind. Gargi, I don't want this name Gargi, Anyway, everybody had been prompting me what I should do when I came in front of Baba the second day. So there I was put in the front. And the strategy was that they said, "You have to cry." They said, "Real tears have to come out of your eyes and you have to beg forgiveness and tell Baba you'll never do it again. And then Baba will ask us," they said, "should we give her a second chance?" So I was psyching myself up to make this drama. And when I was in front of Baba, it's a bit difficult for me to dramatize. When I started to say, "Oh, Baba, I'm very sorry and I'll never do it again." I don't know how much came out of my mouth, but it's as if Baba stopped me. And Baba was very sweet that day, and he said, "Don't worry about it." He said, "You only lost your Avadhutikaship. If you do a little bit more work, you'll get it back. You see," and he mentioned one Dada's name. So he lost his Avadhutikaship the other week, and now he got it back again. Then he said, "We know you're a very good worker, and we're very proud of you. So just you do a little bit more work." And I was standing there. I didn't know what to do or say, and the central workers also didn't know what to do or say because it was out of, their expectation of what Baba would say. And nobody could say anything. But as I mentioned earlier, in that moment I felt Baba like Baba's the Purushottama, the nucleus of the universe, and everything's moving towards him, towards a state of perfection. And he's pulling us. It's his desire, that we evolve, we progress, we perfect ourselves and pass through all our imperfection in order to reach that state of Nirguna Brahma. And the whole drama of losing my Avadhutikaship, during it or through it, I felt this kind of sensation very strongly of this kind of flow towards perfection, this inevitable flow that Baba was aware of, that Baba was molding us into through all his drama. And it was a very blissful experience, except for the name Gargi. But in that same reporting session, after Baba had told me not to worry about it, then I was put back in a bunch of Didis, and another Didi came in the front, and several Didis came to give report. And about 3 or 4 Didis afterwards, one who was in the front lost her acharyaship for some reason or other. Baba said, remove her acharyaship. And then he said, Anandagaorii, she did not lose her acharyaship. Only she has to change her dress. And I was so happy Baba didn't call me Gargi. So mentally I never accepted this name Gargi, although because I was transferred, Baba told them to transfer me at the time, and I was posted in a different sector, and I was wearing white, and the people who didn't, because it was a new sector, there were many people who didn't know me, so they used to call me Didi Gargi. But mentally I never heard the name because Baba never called me Gargi. So I was 2.5 years in white dress. Afterward, that punishment became very popular amongst dadas, and many central workers lost their Avadhutikaship, and none of them had their name changed because it became so common. It was too difficult to keep on changing everybody's name. And I went, during that 2.5 years, I went once to India to try to apply to get it back. And at that time also Baba, we were in a reporting session, and I think even before I was put in front for the reporting, and Baba, a flying dog whispering in my ear said, he's not recommending you for your Avadhutikaship. So I couldn't get it back that time because of the flying dog. But again, the central workers told me, oh, Baba commented about you, and he said, she is a very good worker, just she should do a little bit more work and she'll get it back. So I actually didn't get back my Avadhutikaship till Baba declared a general amnesty. He said positive microvita had come from another planet, and because of that, whoever was in white could get back their orange. And I think after that fashion of punishment was sort of phased out. Baba had all different phases of different kind of punishments that were, I guess they were very amusing to him, even though they were painful to us sometimes. When Baba came to Taiwan in 1979, Baba spent about 2 weeks in Taiwan and held FDMC in 3 places, I think. That was a very special time for us because in India there were always so many Dadas and Didis and Magis, and it was often difficult to be close to Baba. But in Taiwan, there were the workers from our sector and some visiting workers, plus the central entourage that was with Baba, so not so many people, and Magis. And Baba actually stayed in Magi's house in Taipei, a very big house, and we stayed in the same house with Baba because the house was very big. So some rooms had been assigned to Baba and the central workers, and other rooms the workers of the sector. So that during those times, and then we toured with Baba, we had a lot of opportunity to be close to Baba. The incidents I remember most, one was people often used to tell me about Baba's fragrance after they would massage Baba, and there'd be a very sweet perfume, like different kind of fragrance smells on their hands, because Baba's body emanated some kind of fragrance. So I was never having massaged Baba and experienced this. I was a bit curious about this phenomena. So what happened in Taiwan one day, Baba called only 4 of us, myself and another Dada from the sector, and then Didi Ananda and Dada Nitya Satyananda, who were central workers. 4 of us he called into the room, his bedroom, and Baba was sitting on the bed, and he was just in his casual kind of say lungi and shirt. And we were sitting there on the floor, and Baba was sitting, and he started to just talk to us. And he said, that time Baba was also collecting flowers, plants from around the world. No? So he started to talk about plants. He said, you know, some plants have a very sweet fragrance, and some plants don't. He said there are aromatic plants and non-aromatic plants. Then he was saying, and different varieties of plants originated in different parts of the world. For example, I don't remember exactly, but I believe the rose came from Persia, and chrysanthemum from Japan. He named several things like that. And he said then they've been transplanted, he said, to other countries so that you find, you know, these varieties of plants in different parts of the world. Then he said, you know, people are also like that. He said, I can tell by looking at somebody where their origins are. Then, I forgot this. He said, for example, no. Then he named one Chinese Magi. He said, Ganesh. He said, Ganesh, he is not from Taiwan. I mean, he is from Canton, Guangdong. Then he said to Dada Nitya Satyananda, he said, you go and ask him. So Dada had to go out and find Ganesh to ask him where he's from. Meanwhile, the 3 of us were there. And then Baba pointed to Didi Karuna, and he said, this vegetable, she comes from, then he named her village in Bengal. And then he pointed at me, he said, and this chrysanthemum, she comes from Japan. And then he pointed to Dada. He said, and this, I don't remember what flower he said. This flower, it comes from And then he tilted his head as if the other should answer, and then the other said, USA, Baba. Baba said, no. He comes from Southern Ireland, but transplanted to America. And by that time, Dada Nitya Satyananda came back and said, yes, Baba, Ganesha's family comes from Guangdong province in China. Then Baba said about the aromatic and non-aromatic. Some plants have aroma, some plants don't, he said. He said, I'll tell you something. He said, he's looking at us. So I'll tell you because you are my special children. He said, but don't tell anybody else. Of course, we all told to everybody. Baba said, he said, sometimes when I was in the jail, so I would wake up in the night. There'd be such a strong fragrance in the room, such a strong perfume, he said. So strong that I couldn't go back to sleep. And Baba said, I wondered where this is coming from. So when I searched and I found out it's coming from, so I was sitting like this, here. And he rubbed his foot. Then he looked at us and he smiled. He said, and he said, sometimes, and he's laughing a bit, he said, sometimes after I go to the toilet, he said, there's a very sweet smell. And he's laughing. And then he explained, he said, when people, through spiritual progress, through sadhana, when they develop the higher glands of their body, the higher chakras, that these chakras become more active. And so there's hormones secreted from these chakras. And the hormones, the secretions from these higher glands, that also when we perspire or when we urinate, they come out. And he said that's what these subtle hormones have, this very sweet fragrance. So when a person is spiritually evolved, it seems as though their body is emanating this sweet smell, which is actually due to the secretions, the subtle secretions of the higher glands, higher chakras. It's very interesting because all of us have smells coming out with our liquid, and then often we feel that those who maybe aren't vegetarian tend to have a stronger smell from their bodies and from their, say, excretions than those who are vegetarian, because I think the non-vegetarian food also stimulates the lower glands, and it's not only the toxin but the secretions from the lower glands that create this smell. So this is how Baba satisfied my curiosity about his smell. We'd initiated a number of Buddhist nuns. There's many temples in Taiwan and small groups of nuns and monks who live in these different temples. So different deities had contact with the nuns, and some of them were interested in our sadhana. So there was this one nun in particular. She was an elderly nun who was the head of a temple. I had some contact with her. Though she'd been initiated by another Didi, but because she spoke Japanese, the elderly people in Taiwan spoke Japanese, then I could communicate with her. So when Baba came to Tainan, and the sisters were all told that they could have group contact with Baba. So these two nuns, Buddhist nuns, came to have contact with Baba. One was this elderly nun, and then one of her younger nuns in the temple. And when they arrived with their bald head and black, formal black robes, and some of the dadas and didis, especially those from India, were very shocked. How can they go in and see Baba? And we assured them, no, they've been initiated, they practice sadhana. So with that reassurance, these two nuns were part of a group of sisters who went in to see Baba. And Baba paid a lot of attention to the older nun. She was sitting almost in front of Baba, and she was talking to Baba in Taiwanese, the local dialect. And Baba was listening, and Baba was also responding to her, though he spoke in English. And Baba asked her also, he said, Mother, he said, do you know Pali? And she said, no. And then Baba said that it's good if you learn Pali because all the original Buddhist scriptures are in Pali language. So he said if you study Pali, if you know Pali, it will help you to understand more deeply the teaching of Buddha. And it was a very special exchange between this nun and Baba. Anyway, after that, the years following that, when I would visit her, and she would always ask me about Baba, and if I'd come back from India, I would bring her prasad and things. And one day she asked me very sincerely, she said, Didi, next time you go to India, can you ask Baba, when can I get liberation? She was very special, very deep person. Then on the last night, Baba was in Taiwan, was in Taipei again, and we all knew he's leaving. Was it last night? I think it was the last night. But we were in the house where we stayed with Baba, and it wasn't scheduled, but Baba came out to the living room to give a talk. There were not so many people there. It wasn't the crowds that come to DMC. Maybe 30, 40 people in the room. That evening, Baba gave a talk, which is printed in one of the Ananda Vachanamritam, but he talked about cause and effect. He said, everything has a cause. Anything that happens in the universe has a cause, he said. And he said, maybe a few years ago, you didn't know Baba. You didn't know Baba exists. You didn't know that Baba loves you. Even a little bit, you didn't know. He said, but now you met Baba, and you know that Baba loves you very much. And Baba said, but I knew you. He said, maybe our meeting today had some cause in the hoary past. He said, maybe long ago And maybe we were together before. He said, maybe that was on another planet. He said, maybe we were together on another planet and we were looking up in the sky and we saw this small star in the earth and we said, let's go there together and do some work one day. Baba said, maybe that's why we're together now. And when Baba was talking, I know everybody in the room, really you felt I was before with Baba somewhere. When people talk about going to other planets with Baba and this kind of thing, I generally don't. It's sort of a little bit far-fetched, like a science fiction or something. But in that time when Baba was talking, then I also felt, yes. I mean, Baba was saying maybe, but it was, he knew it was a reality he was talking about. And we felt it in our bones. That was a very beautiful experience with Baba at that time. In Taiwan, also one reporting session, Baba, several times Baba had mentioned to somebody else. He said, there is one Didi whose mother tongue is Japanese. So at the time, there weren't any Japanese Didis, so it seemed to be only me whose mother tongue could be Japanese. And as I'd been educated in English, I'd always considered, when I used to fill out forms, it said mother tongue, I'd always write English because my English is much better than my Japanese. Though when I heard Baba mention this, I thought, yes, my mother tongue must be Japanese because I was born in Japan and the first 4 years of my life I lived in Japan. So in Taiwan, Baba brought this up with me in a very amusing way. In reporting, that time I was head of WWD in the sector, and Baba liked newsletters, so every day the sisters would make a newsletter to give to Baba, and Baba was very pleased, and often he was praising WWD in reporting. But this day, Baba, during the reporting, Baba started to talk about languages and came to French, and then Baba asked, who knows how to say paper in French? And I said, le papier, Baba. Yes, very good. Then he looked at me and he said, and your mother tongue is Japanese? I said, yes, Baba. He said, so can you tell me how to say in Japanese the internalization of the external objectivities? I started to say what I thought could be a translation in my very basic Japanese. When Baba shook his head, he said, no, in one word. I said, I don't know, Baba. Then he got this very smug look on his face and he looked at everybody else. You see, her mother tongue is Japanese and she doesn't know how to translate. Later on, when I was reading some Swadhyaya, and Baba said the internalization of the external objectivities is knowledge. So maybe if I'd have known that then, I might have been able to remember the Japanese word for knowledge, or I may not have been able to remember according to his plan.
Before you went for whole-timer training, you were in India working in central office, and you had some pretty dramatic experiences there too, including during the emergency. Can you tell us a bit about that?
I don't remember the exact date, but I think it was in June 1975. So I was working as an LFT in central office, and then I was staying in the Didi's house, which was about maybe 5-10 minutes walk from the central office. And so the night before all the arrests took place, Dada Pranavananji told me, and who was at the time just finished training, Didi Ananda Marga, he told both of us, don't stay in Didi's place tonight, go and stay in a hotel because something might happen. So we went to stay in the hotel, and the next day when we came back, we were approaching the central office and we saw it had all been cordoned off and there were policemen all around it. So we didn't go any further. So we doubled back to Didi's house, and it was like all the windows and shutters were shut, and we knocked on the door. First, nobody answered, but when we knocked again, somebody tentatively opened one of the shutter windows, and when they saw it was us, they opened the door a little bit and pulled us inside and said, all the dadas have been arrested. All the dadas have been arrested. It ended up that I was asked to, as all the central workers, most of them had been arrested except those who had been in the office that evening, that Avadhutikaship Ananda was made acting GS, and he asked me to go to Kathmandu to set up a liaison office between outside of India and India, because everything Ananda Marga was banned in India. The workers had been arrested, all the projects had been closed, everybody went underground, all the dadas and didis started wearing civil dress. So that was my duty, to go to Kathmandu and set up a liaison office, which I did. The other instruction that the Jagadishwarananda gave me at the time, he said, nobody's to know you're there. You're to remain like it was supposed to be a secret underground office, but Kathmandu at that time was a very small place, so it wasn't really possible to remain secret, because when I'd walk into town to buy something, I ran into that time Chinmay and Ketana, who had escaped from Varanasi Training Center, and then also Dadas Chidganananda and at the time Shivananda or Samanvayananda, who had escaped from Anandanagar. So it was a very interesting time in Kathmandu, and the most, how to say, I guess, exciting experiences, because money was sent to me in Kathmandu from different sectors to support the Didis and Dadas, or underground workers in India. So I had to get that money out of the bank in Nepali rupees and change it on the black market to Indian rupees, which at the time, that was, it was huge amounts of Indian paper money. And it was illegal to carry Indian rupees into India at that time, or those large amounts of it. So I did many trips back and forth over the mountains from Kathmandu to the border, different borders, and I had to hide all the Indian rupees here and there. And then we had a system. The acting GS would tell me, okay, we meet this day, this time, in this place. For example, Wednesday the 5th at 3 p.m. in the general waiting room at Varanasi Training Center, Varanasi train station. And if we couldn't meet the first day, then we would meet the second day. And if we couldn't meet the second day, we'd meet the third day. So we had a 3-day window in case either of us were delayed for either reason. So many times I did this kind of carrying messages or carrying money. Sometimes people would show up in Kathmandu saying, "Oh, I have some important message to send to GS, blah, blah, blah." And it was very difficult at the time to know who was real and who wasn't real, or who was, to discern, who was really working sincerely for the Ananda Marga organization. So I tried my best. Anyway, a few of those times when we had the meeting, one of the times we met in Calcutta, and at the time, that time they were trainees, I think, who became who is now Ravindra in the UK, and another brother from Australia, Aniruddha, who had been in training center. We met, the three of us met GS, and then in the afternoon, we met in the morning in Calcutta. In the afternoon, they were both arrested. I had been asked to go to Madras to try to find a sister who had been in training center, so I escaped the arrest in that way. But the next meeting we scheduled for me to meet GS, I missed it. So because there was no way of me communicating with GS, because I didn't know where he was or anything. So as I didn't make the meeting within the 3 days, he presumed I'd been arrested also. So it kind of went around the world. "Oh, she's been arrested, she's been arrested." So when I turned up in Kathmandu, they were all surprised. "Oh, you're here now." Anyway, there were many adventures like that during the emergency. That was an interesting period in my life and in Ananda Marga. I had a lot of spiritual growth and also learned a lot about the organization, the good and the bad.
Would have been a very exciting and a very intense time for you. Very nervous, I'd imagine, at times.
Yeah, when I look back on it, I think, how did I do that? But we were young and adventurous.
Nice.
A bit crazy, maybe.
So, just quickly, what are you doing now?
For the last 20 years, I've been in Laos, which is a small country, landlocked between Vietnam, China, Burma, Thailand, and Cambodia. And I run a school that was started by other Didis before me. And the school now it has 300 children from nursery class till about grade 9. And it's a huge project. We also have a master unit, which we run a village school and try to do agriculture, which we're still stumbling along with. But yes, that's where I am now. And Laos is a great place. It's a great project. Yeah, this year is very hectic for us because we have to move the school that we've been renting for the last 25 years. We can't afford to pay the rent anymore because of the economic situation after COVID. Everything collapsed. I mean, the local currency has been devalued by about 80% since before COVID. And our rent contract's in US dollars, so we can't afford to pay the rent. Fortunately, I don't know, fortunately, but 2020, just when COVID started, Baba kept putting inspiration in my mind during meditation. You have to build a school, you have to build a school, you have to build a school. And in the beginning, I was putting him off, saying, now's not the time. It's in the middle of a pandemic and blah, blah, blah. But he kept banging it into my mind till finally I surrendered and said, okay, if that's what you want, we'll build a school. So we started fundraising, and miraculously, by Baba's grace only, we've been able to raise enough funds to build our own school. We had the land already, so it's not as big yet as our current school is, but it's big enough for us to move there so that we don't have to pay rent anymore after June this year.
Right. Jai Baba.
Jai Baba.